Welcome to Tech News Briefing. It's Thursday, May 25th. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. Across the US and Europe, local and national governments are trying to tighten online age restrictions on social media. It comes as growing evidence emerges that companies aren't effectively enforcing limits on what children see and do on these platforms. Joining me to talk about this is our European tech reporter, Sam Schechner. Sam, before we get into the efforts by lawmakers, can you tell us a bit more about what's driving this?
Well, a major thing that's driving this is that a lot of kids use social media even though they're actually below the minimum age in the US and well below in some other parts of the world where the minimum age is higher. We looked at surveys from the US, but also from other countries, Ireland, the UK, France, that show in some cases up to a third of kids, or sometimes even we're talking half or more of kids ages 8 to 12 have accounts on at least one social media service.
I mean, in the US, most social media companies set the age limit at 13. What do advocates worry that children under 13 or maybe even over 13 might come across if they're on these social media platforms?
There's definitely the concern that there's some content that wouldn't be adapted to kids. You know, a lot of social media sites, if they believe that a user is under 18, restrict some of the content that they're shown. But, given that there isn't age verification, sometimes kids could sign up even with adult accounts. And so you could end up with content that could be pornographic. And, there's surveys showing that children are getting bullied online or worse, meeting strangers or having other kinds of things befall them.
What have the social media companies said about having these young users on their platforms?
The companies say that they don't want them on their platforms, that they have rules against it, and that they try to keep them from getting onto the platform. In some cases, they've set up dedicated services for younger kids that have even more restrictions on the types of content and restrictions on gathering any data about those kids without consent from their parents.
What are some of the challenges that the companies say they face in enforcing their own policies around age?
That's a really good question because, my colleague Jeff and I actually did some research on this. We, looked around, for instance, on Instagram. It wasn't that hard to find accounts where kids were openly identifying themselves as being under 13, which definitely raises the question of whether or not the companies really are effectively enforcing their own policies. But by the same token, when you push them on it, they say, well, what could we do? How could we better check without gathering a lot of data about your children in order to infer what their age is, or requiring ID, or using, facial age estimation, which basically uses a camera to scan someone's face and guess what age they are.
Okay, so that's some of the challenges. Let's talk about what lawmakers are doing to try and address this. Can you give us some examples of some of the steps they've taken?
Across the U.S., there's a lot of states that have either introduced bills to mandate age verification and parental consent for the use of social media when you're under 18, or have even passed laws. In the state of Utah, they passed a law that would require age verification and parental consent. Arkansas has passed a similar law. And in general, they want the companies to take basically technical measures to verify or assure that the ages that people are declaring when they sign up for a service are in fact their real ages. To take that extra step because there is some evidence that kids are definitely getting past the filter.
And what have the social media companies said about complying with those sorts of restrictions?
I mean, the companies say that they will comply with the laws. Some of them say, listen, frankly, we think that this is something that's better done at the device level, that an Apple phone, the iOS or Google's Android should actually be responsible for verifying ages and then passing the information that somebody is old enough along to the apps.
So are there other suggestions then for keeping children safe if they are on social media, or to prevent them from getting on social media in the first place?
I think there's various points of view. I mean, if you speak to some digital rights activists and they say that maybe the dangers are overblown and that really, in a sense, what we have now is maybe good enough. You talk to some child advocates and they would say that's definitely not the case. And a middle ground may be, some future technologies based on this idea of age estimation, if it could become more accurate and if it were, say, analyzed on somebody's device so that there weren't any images actually sent anywhere or anything that was stored anywhere. On the other hand, civil liberties activists say that any kind of facial scanning is likely to have a chilling effect on access to information, both from teenagers and adults who legitimately ought to be able to access it, but might be scared off by the potential they could be identified.
All right, that's our European tech reporter, Sam Schechner. And that's it for today's Tech News Briefing. For more tech stories, head over to our website, WSJ.com. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. Thanks for listening.